Good morning. This is John Richardson speaking with you from Toronto, Canada. Today is Tuesday morning, July the 25th, 2023. And my guest this morning is a person who is probably close to a household name in the world of Americans abroad, but nobody knows anything about. So it is my great pleasure this morning to introduce you to Anthony Parent of IRS Medic fame. Well, Anthony, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. So I guess people don't know too much about me.
They don't know anything about you.
Oh my God. Well, all right. First thing is I'm actually not French Canadian. My last name is Parent. It's short for Parenti. My great grandpa Leonardo Parenti. He came to America, and then my grandfather Jerry shortened it up to Parent during World War II, as he was providing arms to the United States government. He was a heat treater, is actually what he did. So that's the first thing. And then I would say this, I think I'm a weird combination of things. The way that things rolled out for me, and that probably that I was still driven, because I really, really was driven. I think I was pretty sure I was going to be a rock star. I thought my life was going that way.
But Anthony, you are a rock star. You put out these video podcasts. I mean, you're 90% of the way there, but let's go way back in time for a moment. I mean, when you were born, was your first thought, in fact, I'm going to be a rock star? Or did you evolve into that slowly? Where were you born, by the way?
I was born in New Haven, Connecticut. That's where I was born. Right down.
Is there a plaque there commemorating?
There was a plaque for George Bush a few years ago up on 91, where it's his birthplace of George Bush. I noticed it was taken down quietly. Used to be one of that birthplace of George W. Bush was his birthplace. So, yep, in New Haven. So I am, as you would expect, I would be about half Italian. Actually, I'm only a quarter of Italian. But that is where I was born, and it has been, sort of I think an interesting place to be. My dad worked for the state of Connecticut. And that was sort of my perspective on things growing up. There was four of us. My dad worked for the state of Connecticut, so all he made is all he made. He also hustled on the weekends. He did the National Guard. He did that for a couple of weeks, and so that's I would say, though, at an early age I did think that I would be something. I was fairly entertaining, singing songs and dancing, that sort of thing. I was and my babysitters were quite entertained with me. So I thought it really had something going. So
would that mean that the babysitters would pay your parents to come and listen to you sing?
That I don't know. I'd have to check with them. I'd have to check in on them. I don't think so. But I did a lot of Bee Gees, a lot of Bee Gees. I was really into, and now I'm singing those now. How Do You Mend a Broken Heart was the #1 song on the day I was born, and I do a pretty good job at that one. So that's a fun one. So some things kind of come back.
What other Bee Gees songs do you sing? The only one I can think of is Massachusetts off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's not as good of a song. I would say that is How Can You Mend a Broken Song, I think, is the most fun one to sing, because it's got a bunch of great parts, and I do both Barry and Robin's part.
So basically, your DNA is as a singer and an entertainer, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And then that was slowly beaten out of me.
Well, how did that happen?
I think a lot of people, you have a trauma in your life that totally undermines your entire personhood. And your confidence is blown out, and you have nothing left because you don't feel like you belong in this world anymore. And you feel that you just don't belong. And so that's really probably what happened to me. I was kind of, going away. That seemed like, up and up. But then there was some stuff that happened, and it messed me up pretty big. And so it took me a long time to recover from that. And actually, a few decades, to tell you the truth. It's something
Two
that,
decades to recover. Well,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, well, but you did recover. That's the key point.
Yeah, you keep going. And you keep going. And I think that's the whole part of this, is that I kept going through everything that hit me. And I just kept going. So yeah, I finally found myself in a band in '93.
So now, sorry.
Yeah.
Can I ask you at least roughly how old are you in '93 when you find yourself in a band?
So I was 22. Yeah.
22. Okay. So the first 22 years were, what'd you do? The normal sort? Were you a Boy Scout?
I was a Boy Scout.
I knew that somehow.
I know. Yeah, I was a Boy Scout. Now, my
Tell
older
me-
brother was an Eagle Scout, but I wasn't really good into doing the whole, okay, get this merit badge. Okay, go ask an adult for something. I'm, oh God, that's going to scare me.
All right. So what we know about Anthony so far is he doesn't like the whole third party approval thing, particularly if it's asking an adult for a merit. Right?
Exactly. I would avoid that. I'm like,
so your brother's an Eagle Scout. I'm guessing he's older.
Yeah, my older brother's an Eagle Scout. Yeah.
Oh my God. So you're a younger brother.
Yeah, and I have a younger brother too. So I am the third of four. So
so you get to play both roles.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, no, I've no, and it totally. I think that's a huge part of what came into me, my birthplace, because I see it both ways. I see how see how things roll down to me, and I've let some things roll down as well.
It's the family equivalent of being a dual citizen, isn't it?
Kinda. You know what? That's a good point. That actually might understand my whole affinity for this. That actually is pretty good insight. Yeah, exactly. I see it both ways. And then I have my own role too.
Absolutely. But you're looking up at your older brother, Eagle Scout.
Oh yeah.
You're saying, well, I admire the fact that he got that, but I'm not prepared to ask for enough merit badges to get there. All right. Now, how far did you get in Boy Scouts? What are these rankings? How far did you get?
Well, I was a very good camper. I was very, very skilled at stalking and lighting fires, and would win, jamboree contests with that. But as far as rank went, I really only made it to first class. Only got a couple of merit.
That's okay. That's one of
first
those.
class. That's all I made it to. Didn't get to those prettier badges up there, like Life, Heart, and then Eagle. Oh man, that's yeah. I just had to look at my brothers and just say, oh man, if I could only comply.
Okay, well, let me ask you this question then. So, do you consider yourself to be a vicarious Eagle Scout through your brother?
I could. I know enough. I would say I know enough, and I could probably fake it. I would be able to fake it.
So you could walk into a room based on what you know about him and say, the name's Parent, Anthony Parent, and Parent, and I'm an Eagle Scout. See, I pronounce it because I live in Canada, and I'm an Eagle Scout. You can get away with it.
You know what? That would take a lot of acting on my part, to tell you the truth, because I believe there's a whole sort of things associated with Eagle Scouts that I'm not. I think maybe there's something that still sort of stings me. It's like, yeah, I'm just not that kind of thing. I can't do that. And maybe that was something that sort of pushed me to try to say, okay, well, I can't be an Eagle Scout. Well, maybe I could be a lawyer. That might have had something to do with it.
Well, the other thing that might have had something to do with it, I'm guessing you weren't very good in math in school. Math, is that right?
I was okay. I was actually good in geometry, and I was okay. I was okay in algebra if I did the work. I didn't do a lot of work.
Are you suggesting there were times when you didn't do the work?
Oh, I didn't start working until I don't know, college. Yeah, I didn't really work a lot.
And I'm going to ask you flat out, point blank.
Yeah.
Were you a bad student growing up?
Oh God, yeah. And I was actually really infuriating too, because I'd have bouts of really good work, but then yeah, I'm just not going to hand that in.
So you mean to say that you had sort of islands of decent academic work and an ocean of putridness?
Oh, that's a good. Yeah, there you go. There you go. And and those teachers would be holding on to those islands. Like, you got this island that's so good here. Can we just get more? I'm like, I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. You know.
All right. Well, so tell me more about school. Were you, what'd you do? I mean, did you have anything to do with school, like sports or music or?
Well, so I have an older sister too.
Oh,
My older
boy.
sister,
Oh my
my older
God.
sister.
Have you
Yeah,
had
yeah. So
three
listen to my. All right, because this is what people tell her. It's like my sister's name is Grace, and people tell me her name is the embodiment of who she is. Grace is incredibly graceful, and she always did the right things. Except she did have a lot of fights with my mother, which were hilarious because we bring them up still all the time. Well, she was truly wretched, but other than that, um, she she did everything right. She was in the band, she was in the swim team, she joined the Key Club, uh, the Latin Club, all the clubs, Honor Society, all of that. And so she was a little older. So in freshman year, I tried those out. She's like, "Oh, you should come to the Key Club meeting." what? What is this? I'm like, I can't. No way. I'm like, Grace, I love you, but what was that? Like, well, it's a meeting where they talk about people doing good things. I'm like, all right, I'm not. I don't know. This doesn't seem like the right place for me. So I was pulled along. I was pulled along, and I'm trying, but and I'm like, look, I really want to do the right thing, but I just can't. It didn't seem right to me. It seemed very, everything seems so contrived and just didn't seem like something I belonged to. It's like, well, that's for somebody else. That would be for the Eagle Scout, which I'm not. So I kind of abandoned. I tried mostly everything, but for whatever reasons, I sort of just went back to my circle of friends who we had our fun, and I'm still, a few of them I'm still friends with too. Now the only difference is back then we would plan parties in the woods all week long, and now we're in the same woods, but we actually build mountain bike trails. So it's kind of funny. We always laugh about that, like, oh wow, it's just the same thing, just more beer, more bikes, less beer. Yeah, that's
All right. All right. So you're kind of floating through dealing with, it sounds to me like the problem with your family was they were also accomplished. There was nothing left for you.
well, yeah. Then I have a younger brother too.
Oh my God. Tell me about that.
Okay, so Frank, he would infuriate me because he could be smart where I couldn't be. And he realized, like, wait a second, if I just take the 20 minutes to read this book, people will think I'm a genius. And so I watched, like, in hopelessness. Really, I'm looking at my brother Frank. I'm like, man, he's reading that book. He's reading that book on his own. Look at that. And he's got to go read another book. And so he read books, and then he was a great student, and he kind of laughed about it. He goes, he's like, why don't you just do it? Everything's so much easier in life if you just go ahead and do it. I'm like, yeah, it's just not me. And so he wound up, he got a scholarship to go to Choate, which is in a fancy private school in town. So he went there. And again, I worked at Choate. I worked in the dish room. And that was fun. So
Okay.
that's where I felt like I belonged more in the dish room than
you were washing the dishes to support his scholarship. Is that a fair statement?
I guess I could bring that up to him. Yeah. Yeah. It was a fun job though. I mean, it was they treated us great there, and I eat a lot of their food. So it wasn't a bad job, I got to say.
All right, that's
I
good.
felt comfortable. Then see, the dish room. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of dishes and it's a lot of filthy. I'm like, yeah, this is for me. Yeah.
Okay. So what we know then about sort of your high school years with certainty is that you were a good dishwasher.
Yeah. Yeah. That is true. That is absolutely true. I was a great attitude. I was the guy you wanted washing your dishes, you know?
Absolutely. And now let's fast forward a number of years. Are you still a good dishwasher?
Yes, I am still a great dishwasher.
All right. Well, that's a very important skill. Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
All right. So somehow or other, you managed to survive the trauma of growing up,
Yeah.
and you graduated from high school. I'm assuming you graduated from high school.
I did, and and people ask me my school rank. I'm like, you don't want to know. It was so we had about 224 kids graduating my class, and my rank was about like 200. So I was in, I just had zeros and stuff, that just sort of some blocks of things I couldn't finish. And I just felt no connection with the school. It just, I felt connection with my friends, but the whole purpose of what was going on, again, with pockets here and there, like, okay, I found that interesting and here, but overall, I couldn't tie it all together. There'd be one class I like, the rest, whatever, I'm not going to worry about. So I always had a rainbow. My report card was a rainbow. I would have A's to F's. That was what you would find. Like, it could be anything. So I have
And I
experience.
bet you were the kind of guy who was far prouder of the F than the A.
No, I wasn't proud of the F. No, because the F was just stupid because I just didn't complete the assignment usually. That's usually what it was. I just didn't do it. I didn't make up the work. And it was like I could have easily, picked up a lot more points. A zero really, a few zeros really hurt your average. It takes a lot, to overcome zeros, which, you really can't. You need to throw some effort in there.
That's
like
a very
60.
problematic number, isn't it? The number zero.
Yeah, zero is a real hard number for your GPA. It's devastating.
Well, I mean, actually, the funny thing is, if you were to ask people, I never thought of this before, you say, what's the single most important number, the most meaningful number in the world? It probably is zero, right?
Kind of, yeah, think about it, right? Yeah, if you had one to pick from. Well, I would say this is like, so it was awful that I got all of these grades that I earned or didn't earn. Because when we got to law school, it was interesting because I got bad grades, I got good grades. I knew what they were like. And people started seeing for the first time in their life bad grades. Whereas, I got
We're used to it.
What's that?
You were used to it.
Yeah. So, and for me, now I'm in law school, like, well, it's a different story. I'm working pretty hard there.
So in other words, the rest of the class is traumatized.
Right.
And you're just, this is business as usual.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Everyone like whatever. So I never,
Anthony,
right.
It's your first true competitive advantage in your academic life, isn't it? I love it.
I think you're right.
Look at all these losers.
Right.
They've never had a zero before.
They don't know what it's like. They're in, I mean, and that's the thing. You could go your entire scholastic career straight A's. Then you get to law school, you find something there. And I think it's still this way. There's a curve and they want people out. There's a curve and they're looking to get rid of about a third of the class because there's too many lawyers. So you're like, they don't tell you that. They don't tell you that when you're like, yeah, I want to be a lawyer. Then you get there, you're like, okay, let's tell you how the deal is. Like, so we need a bunch of you to go and you're going to be in debt for that 1 year or 2 years and you won't be an attorney to pay it off. So you're like, you're like, okay, pressure is on here. And it was, started to become obvious, people who weren't going to make it back, like, you're not going to make it back, man. This is not for you. There's a mindset that's required for it. And just being intelligent isn't going to do it. There's sort of I think the word that I'm looking for is, it's almost like, I would say it's a healthy narcissism you need.
Sorry, healthy narcissism to get through law school?
Pretty much, I would say so, because you have to believe really strongly in yourself.
Did you have that healthy narcissism, Anthony?
Yes, I did. By that time, I did. And I also, by the way, I also had my dad going to law school with me.
Now that's interesting. Let's talk about that. That I find that, that it's fascinating is a little strong, but there aren't too many people who go to law school with their parent.
Yeah.
Or their parent rather.
But yeah. Yeah, that was a wonderful thing. And I don't know if I would have done it. I certainly wouldn't have had much fun. He really, it was one of the greatest things to actually go through. And this is how it happened. So this is how it happened. As I said, I got involved in my band, 93, and by 98, we pulled the plug on it. I didn't want to end it. I wanted to keep going. I felt about 3-4 more years of putting our time in, I think we really had something. I think we could have really developed an audience. And so I was heartbroken. I was utterly heartbroken when the band broke up, lost my identity. What am I going to do with my life? And I immediately, I'm like, okay, go to law school. I'm like, dude, don't do that, because you're not in that space to do that. And so it's like, all right, I'm like, so I said, get a job and then go to law school, work at least 1 year. I'm like, okay, I'll get a job. And so I got a job at Ford Motor Credit using my finance degree. And at that point, my dad just started law school, going full time at night. So that was it was 98 when he was doing that. And I was living at my parents' house still. So I would come home from work and then see my dad for like 15 minutes or so during breaks. We would talk about the law, and I'd get mad at him because I'm just sure he's doing it wrong. I'm like, I know you're doing it wrong. Like, oh, I know more than you, even though you're in law school. And I was viciously jealous. And it was in December of that year, and I'm looking at Ford Credit. It was great. I was doing great at the job, nice people, but it's a limit. There's a limit. And I also knew, I don't think my personality is right for the corporate world. I said, I don't know how I'm really going to go up the ladder here. I don't see myself kind of going along, get along and moving up. And then I'm like, even if I make the promotion, it seems like it's not going to really be enough. And my dad's going to school. And so one day I went out with my great friend, Tom, and I said, that's it. And I think I watched Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas the night before, where Johnny Depp, the lawyer character, advises Johnny Depp to, do all sorts of things. And so I told my friend, John, I said, as your attorney, I advise you to get another beer. And then with that, I just said, I'm going to apply to law school. And then this is a part of the story. My dad has always been so supportive of every harebrained scheme that I have. I told him, Dad, I'm going to join you in law school. And he tells me this, and he denies ever saying this. He says, I didn't say that. He's trucker. He said this. He says, son, I don't think you can handle the workload. And I was like, and I'm like, oh, you're going to get it. You're going to get it. You're going to get it. So I was like, what's that about? I'm like, it's funny because it didn't affect me. I'm like, or if it did, it motivated me. So I did all my applications, and maybe that was his intent. He doesn't remember saying it. So I got my applications in. The only school I was applied to was Quinnipiac. That was where my dad was. And, I know I could live at their house and go there. Like, I'll just go there. I'll just do the same thing. So
Anthony,
yeah,
it sounds like you went to law school at a slightly older age.
I was 28. Yeah. So a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
so I had
that's slightly older age. Okay. Yeah.
My dad was slightly older. He was 59 when he started. So I applied, and then waiting for that letter took forever. I'm working at Ford. I'm like, am I going to work here? And then it was in July, like this time of the year. It was actually this time of the year in 2000 or 1999 when I got the letter. It's going home. I was going home for lunch every day to check the mail. And then one day there's a letter. I'm like, okay, that does look fat. This is back in the day when, the fat letter was good. I don't know what they do now. And I opened it up, and then they surprised me. This has really got me. So they gave me a bigger scholarship than my dad. So I was like, oh, Dad, what was your scholarship? I was like, oh, mine's a little higher. Okay. They thought I was applying to UConn as well. So they made it competitive. They made it the same cost for UConn. My LSAT was pretty high. So that's kind of that's what helped me out a lot. I tested pretty well in the LSAT. So that sort of, took care of my GPA, which was okay, but wasn't as flawless as one would hope. So that got me in there. And
Anthony, do you sort of attribute your success in getting the scholarship to your LSAT score?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, had to be. What else was there? I did have right. There wasn't a lot to hold on to. It was good grades. Good grades from a state school, but that's not really the thing that would, necessarily get you into law school and get you to. So, look, it's a game. They want people with high LSATs because it's, my stats help them in their recruiting. And so I was like, okay, that's the deal. So that's, I was like, okay, well, there's a nice benefit. I tested okay. And then I started. I got that letter, went back to work, and they knew I was leaving. It was like, okay, I can't quite give you guys 2 weeks notice. I can give you 6 days notice because I got to start studying. And they're like, yeah, we know. So I left that, and then like jumping into that whole law school world. My dad and I still had fun. When it comes to about August 15th of the year, my dad and I will still look at each other. We'll start smiling. I'm like, oh, I know you're smiling. He goes, yeah, I know why I'm smiling, because we're not going to law school right now. He's like, yeah.
So tell me about your law school experience generally. How did you find? Did you like it?
Not really. Not
Mr.
really.
Perrant, the
Yeah.
facts in Hawkins
Parts.
versus McGee.
Okay, so the parts that I did like was exactly that. The instructions when the professors would ask questions, I enjoyed that part. And and I would participate a lot. I was one of those people who did participate a lot. So that part I liked. What I didn't like was that I really thought that it would be more, there would be more, well, I didn't think that, I thought integrity was sort of a given, that everybody had it. And this is not what I mean. I'm saying emotional, intellectual integrity. Because what I found out, and I saw myself being sucked into it, is that everybody is afraid of sounding stupid. So everyone is running to a consensus agreement. Okay, here's the answer, because this is the best answer. And it's really that consensus, because people are afraid of saying, oh, wait a second, I have something to say about that. It's what about that? And it's always the what about that who is the person with more insight. Well, what about that then? And so what I noticed in law school is the culturing, and how it wants to create, how it creates a group thinking. And there will be professors who will tell you, no, there's no right, don't look for the right answer, guys. I'm looking for you to spot issues and answer these issues. And everyone's ignoring that. They're like, no, what's the right answer? What's the right answer? And there's not a right answer. And everyone's trying to fit in so much. And I think also the stress. My dad was in a situation where he was already like, this was kind of going to be his retirement job. And for me, it's like, no, this was going to be my job. So the stress was utterly monstrous, because you want to do well, because you have to do well, because if you don't, you have law, you have a law school that you have to pay for, but no lawyer degree that can pay it off. And also the personal humiliation. So you're really, really driven financially in every which way to succeed. And in that drive, you can lose some of the essence. And in that drive, you can be incredibly miserable, incredibly miserable. So that's what I would say is about it, that it could be a much better experience if it wasn't so much life and death, which is what it really feels like. It feels like sink or swim, sink or swim. Like, okay, I better swim. Well, that's creating a lot of tension in yourself to keep you motivated all the time to perform. And then, that translates into the rest of your life. That really does. It sort of impacts the rest of your life too. And it can kind of make you, a monster. When you feel like you have to take off on a lot of the world, you have to change yourself to fit into this lawyer mold, a world which you don't know, you entered into, and you didn't know everything about it. You entered into this lawyer world with a caricature of what it is, not with what it actually is. And so this is what it is. You're like, well, it's too late to get out. It's too late to get out. You're in. Okay, make peace with it.
So it sounds like it was sort of like you just kind of jumped into this river with a current that was too strong to get off, and you just kind of rode your way to graduation.
That's a good way to put it. Right. It's like you're not going to control this current. You're only going to float in it. And the only thing you could do is not drown.
Yeah, so you didn't drown, and so you got your JD degree. And so there you are. So now you're what, 31 or something? Would that be
31? Right? Yeah. No, so my dad and I took 2 classes together. Because we went to school, because he went at night and I went full time during the day. But my second year, I arranged my schedule. I had to do a whole bunch of things so that I could take tax with him at night. And that was awesome. That was just great to take tax with my dad, because this is the thing the things I didn't know about you, like things you learn about your dad. Who's been in a classroom, like with 90 others, or I don't know how many, 60 students in a seminar I think we're having. And so I'm sitting next to my dad and I find out some things about him. Okay, number one, everyone loves him. Oh my God, everyone loves my dad. Dave, what's going on? And I'm like, okay, but everyone really loves this guy. Why? Well, I sat in class and I see why. Because he makes it fun. He made it so much fun. And like he would get to a point where he doesn't raise his hand anymore. He just starts having a discussion back and forth with the professor. And I'm sitting next to him like, okay, I'm just letting him go. I'm like, okay, where's he going with this? And then, because he would wake up in the morning and at 4 in the morning start studying, go to work, come to school. So from 8, and this is what we all noticed, we would just like from 8 to 9 o'clock, my dad was all fired up. And then we'd take a break around 9 o'clock, get back, and that's when my dad would fall asleep. So the guy was talking, he'd be next to me just like this. And everyone's just like, yeah, Dave's just sleeping. It's a long day. And whenever like something important would come, when Professor Ferrari would say something important, I'd just give him a nudge, and he'd be like, he'd just pick up, no problem. Oh, okay, yeah. And then just go. So he was kind of listening. So, and then what happened too is he really understood tax better than anyone else because he was a government bureaucrat his whole life. So he was like, he made sure I got an A. He's like, no, we're going to go through problems, and I got an A so easily. And he also helped about 10 other people in class get an A. And that was really really awesome. And then then we got hooded at the same time, and that was amazing. I stood up there with my dad, and everyone, big round of applause. And the thing about him going to law school, the older I get to his age, the more I appreciate it, like how difficult and hard.
Oh, I think that's unbelievable achievement.
Yeah, I would never do it. I would never do it myself.
So it sounds to me like, we talked about the strength of the current and that. I think that he was part of the current for you, wasn't he?
That would make sense, right? Yeah.
All right. So then you finished law school.
Yeah. So I finished law school.
What happened?
And I actually had a rank much higher than my dad.
What?
I graduated much higher than my dad.
You did better than your father.
I did. And then I said, Dad, you remember what you said? I couldn't handle the workload. He goes, no, I never said that. And then so we studied for my dad had his way of studying for the bar. And I'm like, Dad, I don't know about that, because that class, he would go to this class. It's like, that class, I tried it. I said, it's going too slow. You're not covering enough material. He's like, oh, no, I'm going to do it. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm going to go this other way and study it for it. So the bar came, we both went to different testing locations in Connecticut for some reason. I don't understand that. And both days at the bar, I sat for it. I finished every section an hour early. I'm really, pretty good test taker. And then, he did it there. We came back. How was it? I'm like, what do you know, right? You're so nervous. Like, oh, I was this, like, this is the time where we just talk and undermine each other's confidence in how we did, right? So it's like, God, just shut up about it. I think my dad said that. I was like, yeah, good point. And then the results came out in late September. And, this is something I always remember, like, no matter how confident you are, the moment of least confident is right before the decision. Because if you ask me how I did on the bar exam, the days of it, I'm like, oh yeah, I did great. There's no way I didn't pass it. But if you ask me right before the results were posted, I'm like, yeah, I didn't make it. My dad did. My dad did well enough, but I failed. So I was hitting, this is back in days of dial up. So I dialed up for the results, hitting refresh. And I'm screening so fast. I go down the list. I see one parent. I'm like, there's just one parent. I'm like, oh man, I didn't make it. I look over. I'm like, oh wait, that's my name. And so I was so mad at my dad. I said, the day I passed the bar, it was an awful day because my dad didn't. And I said, you didn't study the right way. And then he goes, you know what? He goes, son, I didn't study the right way. I should have done that. I should have listened to you. I was like, and so he did. And really, this is what I would say. This is what I learned in law school. If you want to get good grades, it's incredibly easy. Just go down to the library, wherever, and get your professor's old exams. They're going to ask the same variation of every question. They will. And all you need to know is those model answers, what they're looking for in that model answer. And so that's what I realized, what I was doing that he wasn't doing. I said, Dad, the essays count for just as much as the multi-state. And you're doing good on the multi-state multiple choice, but you haven't touched, and this was like beginning of July. I said, Dad, you haven't even touched the essays. I said, wouldn't it concern you if you didn't touch the multiple choice the other way? Well, we're going to get to him. I'm like, you're not.
The difference was simply this, okay? Is that, you were concerned with passing the exam. He was concerned with learning the material.
There you go.
They have
Exactly.
nothing to do with each
Yeah,
other.
exactly right. That's right. Exactly. That's totally it. Totally it.
Yeah.
And then he's like, it's a game. I'm like, Dad, it's a game. It's a knowledge game. It's not really knowledge. It's not really wisdom. It's just the bar that they're trying to get rid of riffraff. And you were on the riffraff this time because you taught it, you treated it as that. And I think that's what I mean when I'm trying to say that the integrity, that people won't focus on learning, they'll focus more on the game of like, well, what's the game of getting high grades? And the game of getting high grades, there is one. And I figured it out. And it didn't require a ton of by my last year in law school, I really was riding my bike a lot. I was having fun because I figured it out. I was like, this doesn't take all the time in the world. And then the bar exam too. I studied intensely, but I didn't study for more than 3 hours in any day. No way. No
Well,
way.
you were sort of working on the process of how to answer the questions. The problem with bar exams is at that point, there's not time to learn the stuff anyway. So bar exam taking is more a question, I think, of consolidating what you do know into some kind of structure for answering the questions to make sure you pass, but not put 1 point more.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, you don't want to put too much effort into it because I mean, I had an incredibly high multi-state because I answered every single question ever asked on a bar exam for 10 years, and I knew the right answer.
You mean you got more answers correct than you needed to pass?
Oh, far more. Yeah.
Why would you do something like that, Anthony?
Because the intensity. I'm like, I wanna like, I don't
help yourself. You
What's
couldn't
that?
help yourself. Is that what
But
you're
no,
saying?
and I'm figuring, I figured out how to do it. It's like, well, this is, this is the way to study. You have to, it's a volume game. It's really comes down to volume because everything is a trick. Everything is designed to be a trick. So you have to learn every trick. And the only way to learn every trick is to go over every question. Now I retook the bar exam in 2014 in Florida, and it's not the same thing. It's not at all the same thing. It's actually much worse. And what happened in those years is pretty frightening because, I remember what it was like to be in a big room in 2002. And in Florida, you go to Tampa Convention Center, which is about 5 football fields wide. And I mean, it's massive. And the feeling that I got was about 80% of the participants, people taking it, were on some sort of drug, Adderall. No, and I mean, it's huge. It's huge. It's huge. And it wasn't the same exam. While the 2002 multi-state had a lot of tricks, a bunch of tricks, every single question in the newer exam had a trick, and it was utterly painful for me because I'm like, well, okay, I know how to answer this question. I know how to answer the question of what the right answer would be to someone who designs this test, and I know what the actual right answer is. And they're two different things.
You put the former.
Right. Well, you're like, but then I'm thinking, well, maybe this. So it's like, okay, can you tell me the intelligence level of the person who wrote this exam? Because that's going to impact my answer. Because they don't, I'm like, would they actually know this would be the right answer? Like, they would never know that. But I'm like, well, this word here is here. Like, no, they're not going to know that. So I actually did worse. I did a lot.
Did you pass?
Yeah, I passed it.
Well, then you should be proud. A pass is a pass is a pass. You should never get more points than are required to pass.
I know, right? But it was really awful.
I can see that this has had a permanent.
So yeah, it's gotten. So I was like, wow, man, the law's got even more miserable. It's gotten even more miserable.
Most traumatic experience of your life, the Florida bar exam.
Probably.
Oh, I can tell. I mean, when somebody's talking about a bar exam years later, I mean, that's trauma.
It is not right. No, and I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. You're having a, someone who graduated law school 2 years ago, test you on things like, okay, look, I'm sure you're right on some level, but these questions are not, no, there's so much more to them. And that's the problem. As you actually learn things, you learn how, like, these people who are claiming that they're all this, like, no, your answers aren't right. And I could show you in every which way. There's so many assumptions that I need to make to find your answer your way. But there's a bunch of things I could have said, no, this would be it. And so it was utterly painful. And that's why I would suggest you're better off not being a lawyer taking the bar exam, just sort of learning the game. Learn the game, and bar exams over here, and the law is so different. And that's awful, is that the training to become a lawyer is not what you want. You know, the exam, that's not what you want. That's not the skill set that is gonna bring you over the finish line.
Well, okay, so you're traumatized by the Florida bar exam.
Yeah.
Was the result of the trauma that you decided to become a tax lawyer? It seemed to be the
Oh no,
main-
I took the Florida bar in 2015, much later. So I
But you
took
were already traumatized.
no, the other bar exams weren't. Well, no, actually I was. Okay, because I passed the Connecticut one, and then my dad was taking the February one. He was retaking Connecticut. And I said, all right, well, while you're doing that, I'll take the Vermont
Did he
bar.
pass?
He did pass.
That's wonderful. That's
He did great.
fantastic.
So he did great, and he had no, he had no problem. He killed it. Once he studied the material, he killed it. And I was like, see, I said, if you just did it, I knew you wouldn't have a problem. So what I did is I took the Vermont bar the same time, which was traumatizing as well, because the first question was something that I didn't know was going to be on the exam.
What do you mean you didn't know what was going to be on there? I thought your whole
Yeah.
approach was knowing what was going to be on the exam.
Yeah. I kind of made a mistake there, but I ended up doing okay. I actually ended up doing really okay, but it was traumatizing.
But at that moment, you learned that you could answer questions where you had no idea what the question was, right?
Yeah, except almost, but here was my stress, is that my multi-state multiple choice was well and good enough, but I had to take the Vermont essay question. So it's going to be specific about Vermont law, because they're trying to keep out-of-staters out.
Right.
So they act very tricky Vermont specific law. And I had a lot of things going on in my life. I was actually pretty miserable. And again, after I graduated law school, I was completely miserable. Not sure.
Miserable after graduating from law school.
Well, what's next? Because what I thought was going to happen didn't happen. I actually applied to be a public, appellate public defender. I was assigned, one of the things I did in law school, I was trying to figure out, is I did the defense appellate clinic. So I sign up, hey, 6 credits. I'm like, oh, that would be good. I need some writing. And I kind of identified with I guess a defense attorney. So I said, oh yeah, hey, I'm into it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And I was like, okay, we'll see how this is. And this is what I noticed, is that the law is pretty, like, cases seem pretty like lame and boring until they're your case. And that I was assigned a violation of probation. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's kind of a boring case or something like that. But when it became mine, and that client was mine, it became the most important case in the world. And I was amazed by that. I said, the stupid violation of probation case became the most important thing in the world. And I learned something incredible with that. We were going over issue spotting, and I had the whole file, the case file, and it was big. It was big. I was going over everything. I said, okay, I went to my professor. I said, okay, I think I found the best issue. He goes, what is it? He goes, well, I said, he was convicted of a violation of probation of these conditions. And I noticed in the transcript, it said that he didn't sign those conditions of probation. So it seems like if they want to hold you to additional conditions of probation, and they give you something to sign and you don't sign it, well, what was that whole purpose of the signing part? Seems like your lack of signature would make those special conditions inoperative. Pretty simple to me. And he goes through, he's like, no, I think that's not a good issue. He goes, why don't you argue the authority of the probation officer to violate? I'm like, okay, look, my dad actually worked at the adult department of probation in Connecticut. I said, Dad, what do you think of that? He goes, that's not going to work. That's not going to work at all. So what he did, so I said, all right, I'll argue that issue. But what I did is that I slid in my argument about the not signed violation of probation into the facts section of the brief. I put that right in there, like, oh, look at this, look at this. He put it right in that facts section. So we go up to oral argument. My dad, to Connecticut Appellate Court. My dad's there. He's all proud. I get up there, and my dad said, he goes, "Oh, they loved you. They loved you because they said they had a live one, and they loved giving me a hard time. But I was standing up there, like not backing down." He goes, "Oh, you did great." He was so proud. He said, "You didn't back down for anything." The thing is they didn't mention one thing about what I said about the unsigned terms. They didn't mention anything about that in the oral argument. So oral argument is over, and then I get a call from Professor Zeldis, who later became the chief of the appellate division. And he said, "Anthony," I said, "What's that?" He goes, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "What's that?" He goes, "They're requiring supplemental briefing on the issue that you raised in the facts." I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, they want to know about this." I said, "Okay." And so, I talked to him, and we threw together a response to the supplemental briefing, because that was the issue they wanted to talk about. Well, what happened was the state saw that, and ultimately we ended up prevailing. So my first case assigned to me in law school, as a law school student, I prevailed in over the advice of my professor. And so, Marty was very gracious. He was like, "That was awesome." And then the state's attorney, they were great too. "Hey, congratulations on your win." So I really thought that, okay, look, I just won a case in law school. Well, not too bad, right? So I thought they'd give me a job, because I was like, all right, now Marty is the chief of the office. So I graduated and I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll get a job, no problem, and I'll be doing that." Then he called me and said, "Anthony," I said, I can't hire you. I said, "I want to, trust me." He goes, "I don't have the budget, and I'm under intense pressure. It's like the resumes I'm getting are from people with 20 years experience, and I just can't take you, even though, so that didn't work out. But what I was able to do is I was able to get a contract with the special. So when there was a conflict in the case, I would get the appeal. So it ended up working out, but not in that way. Not in the way that I was looking for. So I didn't have a job when I graduated, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I didn't want to work in New York City or anything like that. That's where basically the jobs were. And that entire lifestyle was something that I didn't sign up for. I'm more of a country guy. I don't like cities whatsoever. So I was like, well, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. So what happened was, I was looking for jobs.
Find a small town with a high percentage of criminals.
Yeah, well, no. What happened was what destroyed criminal law was that everybody applies for a public defender now. Everybody qualifies. And there's really not much work you do as a lawyer. What you do is you just manage people into their pretrial diversion program. It's really not a lot of work. It's just processing. It's not a lot of legal work. It's more, okay, make sure you show up on time. Okay, here's the deal. Okay, do this, do this, do this. So it's really not a lot of work, and there's really no point. A lot of it, in the public, I think, probably correctly sees there's not that much different work a private attorney is going to do for you than a public defender, unless a few cases here and there. So it's just certainly not enough to make a career out of it. You can't really, that used to be a career. That's not a career anymore, at all. So that was something I was able to do. So when my dad and I started our business together, because no one wanted to hire him because he was too old, and I didn't have the experience, and so we started our firm together. And then I was able to get a contract with the state. So
the firm you started, it was general law practice?
Yes. Basically? Okay. Yeah, I did. My dad did real estate closings, and I did criminal and appellate work. But the criminal part was just awful, because you just learn everything terrible about humanity. And your clients aren't great. I mean, they got issues. And the system has issues. And I feel a sympathy for everybody in the process. I feel sympathy for the accused, the accused defense, the prosecutor, the police, the judge. Everybody in the criminal system seems to be losing, because it's just a horrible system. And you have a few things that are going to guarantee it. Is that You know, you have a lot of psychopaths in this world, and they're really good at roping people into their conspiracies. And so when people are caught, the person more likely to spill the beans is going to be the psychopath, who's going to dump it on the person who did do something wrong, but wasn't the true instigator, wasn't the true criminal. And so you see this time and time again where somebody won't take a plea. Well, why didn't you take a plea that time? Because this time I actually didn't do it, is what they tell you. But yet there's all this evidence that comes out, and oftentimes it's somebody who really was terrible, who's saying all these things in a statement you can't overcome. So it's just utterly awful when, you know, the system will reward the person who did more wrong. And the person who did do something wrong, but not the worst, will get the full brunt. And I had one case that was it just ended it for me. He's still in prison. I have a few cases that actually did. One case, he was there. It was a home invasion robbery, which is a hard one to defend. And there was a murder with a baseball bat. And my client is fairly autistic, retarded, and he went along with this to the robbery. And the state knew he didn't really have anything to do with it, but the other guy beat the doctor and his elderly wife with a baseball bat and murdered them. And so my client is there looking guilty, and he's like, okay, what should I do? He goes to trial. I didn't do it. He goes, look, I robbed, but I didn't know that guy was going to do that. You know, like, well, hey, felony murder, man, this is the way it works. This is too bad. So the guy who was really awful got a reduced sentence. And then my client is doing the time. And what happened, he goes to trial, and his grandmother, who's his mother, is going to die. She can't handle the stress of him facing the death sentence. So he decides to plead guilty, with the understanding that he could challenge his confession that he made. He believes that should be kicked out. So he'd be like, okay, I'll plead guilty. Well, he comes to find out, it's like, no, you can't plead. You can't. Who said you could appeal who said you could appeal the admissibility of your confession? And he goes, well, that's the whole point. And like, oh, you can't. You were advised of the direct consequences of your plea. I'm like, and actually, he had a really strong issue there. They didn't actually advise him. So that actually should have been reversed, but that's the way it goes. And so you have a guy who's like, okay, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison because your crime was being naive, really stupid and naive, and just being around the wrong people. Meanwhile, that really bad guy is out there. And then one other case that did it, I had another guy who just didn't do the crime, and he is no one would testify who did the crime with the trial there, because the guy who did the crime was a really murderous jerk, and he would kill people. So no one's really said, okay, can't tell you who did it. They're all like this. But then the murderous person was dead in a gunfight. So my client brought a habeas saying, hey, look, actual innocence. Now that this guy is dead, everybody's willing to testify that I wasn't it, that it was him. So he enters this in there, and they're just like, yeah, no, we're going to do that. And so I had an appeal. We argued it, and we lost. And, you know, he was put in prison in 1997. And I just checked on him. He's one town over in Cheshire, the Cheshire Correction Institute, and there he is. And I'm just thinking about this guy. He was born in like 1983, and the things that he's missed out on. He's been in prison since 1997, and here it is 2023. His scheduled release date is 2049. And so I can't handle this. And I just think about these guys all the time. So what happened, we decided to, a postcard came in the mail one day, my dad and I, and it said, hey, revolutionize your practice with tax. I was like, hey, Dad, what do you think about this? And he looked at me, he's like, well, he said, normally I would say no, so we should probably go with the opposite of that. And he goes, well, let's think about this. He goes, what would be our barriers to entry? He's like, well, I said, we don't know about tax procedure. You know, we don't know. It's like, we understand the theory, we have all that, but we don't really know tax procedure. He goes, well, that's something we can learn. I'm like, yep. He goes, and then it's like, well, then what are you dealing with? Like, you know, because we're dealing with criminals, and you know, it's not fun. It's like, well, those are clients who likely have money, and once you help them, they actually might do better in life. Like, you actually might help them. You might not just help them, because it's a little demoralizing when you sweat to get someone off of a charge, and then the next day they're charged with another crime. Like, oh wow, look at that. Look at that. Wow, amazing that. So that's the part that really sucks, is when you invest of all of yourself into your clients who aren't worth it. And I mean, that's what I mean, because they don't value their own life. And so what I found in tax, and this is the big difference, is that these are people who you can help. You can help. If you help them, you're really leveraging my abilities. If I help someone with a tax problem, I know, okay, what else is going to happen in their life? Well, the rest of their life is going to be better, because our tax code punishes effort. It really does. It punishes effort. So, these are all people who are working hard. So if you fix this thing, they'll go back to being productive and now, okay. And then, hey, by the way, they're going to need tax preparation forever and ever. So that's a little bit better of a business model. So that's really why, I got into it, just because I was trying other things. And then I found that, and then as my dad and I really ended up enjoying it tremendously. And my dad blew me away with how fantastic of an attorney he was, because he doesn't have that presentation of an attorney. He is so likable and down to earth and goofy and fun that you wouldn't think somebody like that could be the most effective attorney of all time. But that was his charm, that he was so awesome at just at settling down and just taking away IRS employees' like anguish and anxiety. They just felt great around him. And he's like, he would disarm them. He would disarm them. And I would just watch it. I'm like, this is amazing. And I was always sort of like, I don't know if people know how good my dad is. And people would always say, oh, Anthony, you're the brains behind this. I'm like, are you nuts? Are you nuts? And that actually really, infuriated me, because I think I could present a little bit more like what an attorney was, but my dad was really the brains behind it. And he's helping me on stuff right now too. And when he says something, this is what I know. When he points to something, he goes, here, he circles it. I'm like, yeah, that's the winning issue, and that's what I know about him. So that is what, that's where I've been, incredibly fortunate to do this. It just, what was, my dad got Lyme disease in 2011, which pretty much forced him to retire. And we were doing great before that. That was the one downside, but he's around now and helping me advise. So that's how we got into tax there.
Been really quite interesting. Why don't we call it here for today?
Yeah.
We'll pick this up. Well, the Anthony Parent Chronicle. So we'll go on to part 2 next time.
Oh my God! Right? Yeah.
This
No.
is
And
interesting.
we're missing a few. Yeah. So yeah, we could go on forever. Unfortunately. Well, thank you, John. I appreciate this. So yeah, we'll get to part 2.
You're going to have to share this, particularly this episode, with your father. I think that he'll totally appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think all my family, I don't know if they know, what.
So, I
I don't
mean,
know if
just
they
one
know.
last question today, Anthony, before we pick up with this next time. Is your biggest regret in life that you never became an Eagle Scout?
I could have done it, and it was really easy. I could have done it. It could be. I had it in the bag, and I knew it, and I knew it. But I think, I don't know. It just maybe I wanted to escape my brother's shadow too. It might have been that. I don't know.
I guess we could say life is full of merit badges. It's just that some count more than others. Would that be right?
Right on. There you go. Well,
All
thank you.
right. We'll be picking this up.